What's up, everybody? Joe Fortin here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about Mkultra programming. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about Monarch mind control beta Kitten programming, the beta level programming within Project Monarch. And this is very, very closely tied to satanic ritual abuse. In fact, the methods that are used in these different programming. What's the word I want to say here? Programs are very, very similar, and there are other trauma-based mind control groups out there, one of which I have spoken about many times, that also uses much of this same programming. And if you look into Mkultra programming, you will find Alice in Wonderland altars. You will also find that text is used quite heavily in mind control programming, and there are specific reasons for that. Disney movies are also used heavily in programming. So, first thing here, it's going to be a little bit longer video probably. This is highly critical information for people to understand, because this has been done on a mass scale to essentially the entire population, and the beta level sexual programming is probably the most prolific. It is probably the most widely used and seen. And young women being used as sex slaves is rampant in not only this culture but worldwide. And so this really needs to be understood, because this has been done to everybody on some level, myself included. First things first, trigger warning. If you believe that you have been an SRA victim or an Mkultra mind control victim directly, somebody who's been involved in high-level trauma-based mind control, I would be very, very mindful about viewing this content, as it could be triggering for you. It could essentially put you into an altar, and you could spiral out of control. So this information for someone like perhaps you should be considered somewhat dangerous, actually. And what I would suggest is that you are extremely mindful about your thoughts, feelings, and emotions while listening to this content. And that goes for any of my videos in which SRA, Mkultra, trauma-based mind control, anything of that nature is discussed. Now also, I'm going to be talking about the twin flame topic in this video, and I'm going to discuss how those on a true twin journey are often targeted in this regard, and quite often at a very young age. These cults, these high-level occultists, dark occultists, have ways and means of identifying people like you basically from birth. And many people in that community have undergone heavy targeting and high levels of mind control. So that will be something that will be addressed throughout the course of this video. Another thing I want to say, I'm going to approach this as gently as I possibly can, because this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people, and I want to make it very clear that from my point of view, I am not in judgment. of anyone who has been involved in any of the things I'm about to discuss. In fact, you know, there are people that I love that, you know, have dealt with this, including myself. And there are people who understand you, who still love you. So please keep that in mind. And it's not, you know, this is not your fault. To any of you who may have been through this, this is not your fault. The things I'm about to discuss are not your fault. You know, I'm almost getting a little emotional here just talking about this, just because it's like the things I've seen people go through as a result of this type of programming breaks my heart. It really breaks my heart. And you know, the self-shaming, the self-hatred, the self-abuse, the shutting down of emotions, the inability to connect with other people that comes as a result of this is a level of suffering that, you know, I don't understand why anyone here would have to endure. You know, some of what I know and have seen makes me, you know, question the idea that there's a benevolent deity out there, and there, you know, that there isn't anything other than an ambivalent God source energy, you know. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's just that the level of suffering that I've seen a lot of people go through, and the level of suffering that I've personally been through as a result of this type of programming is it's indescribable to someone who hasn't been through it. And so that's why I think in this video I'm going to leave the comments on, but in some of the videos where I've discussed this thing, I've just turned them off because, you know, people who don't get it just don't get it. You know, the same thing with the twin flame, you know, experience. People that haven't been through it don't get it. They're not going to get it. And, you know, if you're not someone who's on a twin flame journey, you're not going to understand what the hell we're talking about. You know, people who've actually done the research, who have lived it, who have had a heart chakra opening, you know, who have gone through that suffering, you know, that many of us did, and some still are, you know, we're the ones who understand it, you know. And so all of these things are interrelated. I made a video at one point talking about the subject of twin flames and trauma twinning, which is something that is done in these types of trauma-based mind control programs. And I posed the question. I said, is the twin flame dynamic an authentic connection between, you know, two souls, or really, you know, two parts of the same soul monad? Or is this something that is high-level mind control and is completely being orchestrated by these groups? Well, the answer is both at the same time, and I'm going to explain the difference and the differentiation between basically what would be known as an alien love bite scenario or shadow twin scenario, and a true authentic twin flame scenario. What needs to be understood is that even authentic connections will be heavily targeted. Those people, you know, often will have incarnated into cult families, and often will undergo a high degree of this type of programming, and you know, from a higher level perspective, the reason why you could look at it, you know, you could frame it this way. The reason why is because we incarnated into these dark bloodlines, into these bloodline families, to transmute this energy, right? We signed up for this very high level mission to come into these families whose DNA templates are completely screwed up, and we have the connection to our higher selves, to source, right? We have that vibration coming through our heart space, right, that allows us to discern the difference, right? And so we know when we're in distorted archetypes. And that's one of the reasons why, even with your true twin, if either of you starts displaying distorted archetypes, you're going to repel each other until that starts to work itself out. So I want to talk, like I said, specifically about beta kitten programming and beta level mind control. Now, real briefly, I'm going to go over the different levels of MK Ultra mind control, the stages, so to speak. Jordan Sathers has a great video on this, the stages of MK Ultra mind control. I'm going to post a link here to that. But I'm just going to read you the chart, basically, that he has given. Alpha, right? Number 1, alpha programming. General programming of base control personality. Beta, sexual programming. That's the one we're going to be discussing. Delta, killer programming. So this would be like assassins, people of that nature. If you don't believe this is real, go get Walter Bowart's book, Operation Mind Control. I have a copy. It'll blow your mind. Theta, psychic programming. I know someone who's definitely had this type of programming. Essentially, people like this are psychic weapons, right? Cursing people with black magic, that kind of thing. They're very good at it, too. Omega, self-destruct programming. Gamma, deception programming, spies, things like that, right? So it's not a coincidence that these same designations are used for the different brainwave states. If you're familiar with the different brainwave states and the Schumann resonance frequencies that I've spoken about, this is all interrelated. It's all linked in. So what needs to be understood, and I've explained this before, and I'm kind of piecing together better ways to explain all of this as time goes on, is that you yourself do not have to have been a direct victim of SRA for it to be affecting you. What has happened over thousands of years is that the base archetypes, which are essentially stored within the morphogenetic field of this plane of reality, have been distorted, right? And it essentially has to only be done to a portion of the population directly, right? And so what happens is these different archetypes, right, get completely distorted, right, and essentially turned into satanic versions of divine archetypes, right, which are present in the meta, right, are available to us, and people who elevate their consciousness can access those. That's what Twin Flames are doing. These archetypes get programmed in the collective unconscious, and then essentially what happens is that something like a sigil is created, right, that is linked to specific archetypes and can be linked to things like demons and things like that, right? And then those images are flashed in subliminals, in movies, and in the media, and in music, and so on and so forth, right? And so all it takes is for you to go through a certain degree of trauma, right, which almost everybody on this planet has gone through, especially sexual trauma. That is the best way to program somebody, because sexual trauma in early childhood creates extreme dissociative identity disorder and soul fragmentation. When those aspects of self are fragmented into different pieces, right, alter personalities, those pieces are then programmable, right? Alice in Wonderland alters, Disney alters, you name it, right? And Fritz Springmeier has some great books about this. Now, this has been done to both men and women, but because of the sexual dynamic between men and women, where women are kind of holding the cards sexually, so to speak, men are usually trying to get with women, right? Women are kind of like, the ones in charge of sex, basically. They've tried to reverse that, which is what happens with sex slavery, right? But in general, that's kind of the way it works. So what they've done is they've programmed all the women. And you see this very, very heavily in densely populated areas. And, especially if you look at like younger women, especially right now, in their teens and in their 20s, they're extremely, extremely hypersexualized. And, people are programmed with porn, right? To engage in sexual practices that are not loving, where there's really no connection, right? And essentially, on a mass scale, all of the women have been taught to kind of, I don't want to use any like derogatory terms here, so I'm going to try to make this gentle. They've been taught to view themselves as pieces of meat, as objects, right? And because they were not really shown real love and affection, they're, like everybody else, right? They are seeking love, and their subconscious and unconscious minds have been programmed to believe that that's how they get it. When, in reality, the way that young men and women have been taught to engage with each other sexually within this paradigm is really the antithesis of love. It's really the opposite of love. I mean, it's really, it creates separation in the being. That's the whole point of all of this, right? It's divide and conquer, not only the individual, but on a mass scale, collective scale, right? That's how all of this is done. So what you will see with people that have a higher level of programming is that they will have a split personality, and it'll be very noticeable. I've had this, right? And I displayed it on my channel through doing the Sasquatch character, right? Which I no longer do. But when I was displaying that, I really wasn't in control of it. That was sort of happening like, I really was not, I wasn't making those decisions. And that's real, man. I just got to be honest with you guys. I displayed this. There was a part of me that knew what I was doing. And I was like, I'm going to display this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to fix myself. I'm going to integrate myself. I'm going to put myself back together, and I'm going to show people how to do it. Right? So that's why you don't see me doing those anymore. I can go into that character and that part of myself. And there are times where I still switch. But that's why I do not drink. Don't drink. I don't watch porn. I don't masturbate. I do not have sex with people that I'm not in love with. And I am very, very discerning and careful about the people that I hang around. So what you'll see often is, like I said, a split where you got this Jekyl and Hyde syndrome thing going on, where the base personality often will be usually all of the personalities are going to be child alters, especially the sexually programmed ones, which is very sad, but that's the way it is. You're going to see a side of that person, and I've been this way, right? That's like a little princess, right? Like daddy's little favorite little girl, can do no wrong, very polite, very, maybe even affectionate, right? Very, very prim and proper, and, always does the right thing and that kind of thing, right? And then you're going to have an altar, right? Which will often involve sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man. That is a reflection of the Jezebel spirit. So, they will exhibit all the traits of a female narcissist, essentially. And this will often be linked with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and basically, a lot of these women are actually sex slaves. They don't know that that's what they are, and that's one of the things that makes this so sad. A lot of these women end up in porn. They end up getting, just like, like passed around at parties and stuff like that. And the thing is, I can tell you from for personal experience that, I mean, I had this programming too, and when I was younger, I was extremely promiscuous. I mean, to a very high degree, especially when I would drink. And there was an alter part of me that like really enjoyed that, right? Because I was programmed to. So I loved, just like being like, animalistic and lustful and being drunk and, basically having sex with like any girl I could find, for a long time. My number of sexual partners is up there, like really up there. And, but then, when I would come back into being like my core personality, like my true self, I would feel really bad about it. I would feel like miserable and empty and shameful, and I would feel like dishonest, because I really wanted a connection with someone, but I didn't know how to get that, right? And so I was getting what I knew how to get, basically. I was trained for this, objectively. Like when I look back at my life, like I was trained to do this, and so that's why I have such compassion for people who have been through this. I completely understand what you're going through, and basically everybody that I've seen that's been through this level of programming has the narcissistic wound, so they've got a very high degree of shame that they often hide, right, underneath a mask of hypersexualization. They will be very concerned with their image. They will be very concerned with being sexually attractive. Like if you look at my earlier videos, I wasn't making my videos with my shirt off for no reason. I was like getting off on the attention, man, because I was still programmed in that regard. So I know all of this. I've had to deprogram, and I have to a great degree, and that's that's why I'm making these videos. Yeah. And I guess, one thing I do want to say to anybody who's been through this programming, this isn't going to be the nicest thing to hear, but you need to hear it. Until you deal with this, you will not have a true loving relationship. You can do it. You can heal from this. You can become heart-centered. You can absolutely integrate those aspects of yourself, those alters, right, that have been programmed with all of these things that are really self-harmful. And you can become whole and balanced, right? But it requires a lot of deep work that's very difficult to go through. And when I say very difficult to go through, I mean like very difficult to go through. You are going to spend a lot of time crying, being angry, processing things, not being able to rely on the crutches that you have in the past, which for a lot of people is drugs and alcohol, as a means of escape. It's not an easy process at all, but it's doable. And what I'm doing on my channel is giving people instructions and tools that they can use at home, because mainstream therapy and psychology is compromised. You can't go to them with this, and frankly, they don't know how to fix it, most of them. There are a few people that are like mainstream psychologists that are aware of this stuff, that are on the right side of things, that understand how to help people with this. but frankly, the methods that they're using they're inferior to other methods. Like, I've mentioned Howkunst. Howkunst is one of the best ways to do this, and I made a video about this. I'm not sure I uploaded, but I'm gonna upload it, about how Howkunst can help you heal even if you have huge memory gaps, which is a huge problem for people with this type of programming. Everyone I know that has had this type of programming, that has had this level of trauma, has massive memory gaps. And so you may not even be aware that you've had these types of experiences in your life because you've completely blocked them out and repressed them. Some of that will have been your own being doing that, and some of that will be because of the programming itself is designed to make you forget, so that you can be an asset, right? Especially if you're a high level programming, right? The best intelligence asset does not know that he or she is an asset. And that's true, right? There are a lot of people walking around that are sleepers, right? That are, CIA assets that do not know that that's what they are, right? They're normal lives. They live normal lives. Watch American Ultra. One day some lady walks up to him and says, hit the dog in the backyard, and he all of a sudden turns into an assassin. That's real. Again, read Walter Bowart's book, Operation Mind Control. I wish this wasn't real, but it is. And it's been going on this planet for a very long time. Since Babylon. This specific type of programming. A few things that I just want to make people aware of. You need to be very, very mindful of your emotional state and your mental state at all times. While you're in the initial stages of healing from this, I would highly recommend that you stay off of social media and that you very, very much limit your exposure to any type of mainstream media whatsoever. I would not be glued to your cell phone all the time, as that is a primary mechanism of triggering you. I would highly recommend meditation. I would highly recommend that you limit your social exposure for a while. Like, you may need to isolate for a little while. And I know that might sound unhealthy, but it's actually what you need to do if you've had this type of programming while you're actually doing the deprogramming. Because handlers will show up, people will show up, and they won't even often know that that's what they are. Keep this in mind. A lot of the people that are compromised, that are handlers, don't know that they are handlers. The best asset doesn't know they are an asset, okay? So a lot of the people that will be programming you, they won't even know that that's what they are. And, it can take you a long time to figure this out. But you got to trust your gut, for one. That's a big one. Trust your gut. And like I said, limit your exposure. The thing about this type of mind control, right, is that it needs constant reinforcement in order to work right? That's why in certain organizations they constantly they have you spending hundreds of hours doing their drills and their routines and these things, right? Because it has to be constantly updated and reinforced, right? Otherwise, programming starts to break, especially if you're doing stuff like meditation practices, energy work, healing practices, right? Bringing in higher vibrational frequencies, clearing your chakras, doing soul integration work, and things of that nature, right? So, if you can isolate yourself for a little while, like I said, I know that there's going to be people that think that that's not a good idea, but it's actually, like I said, what you need to do while you're going through the healing. The other thing too is that you can potentially be a danger to yourself and others while you're doing this healing. I was quite dangerous while I was going through the initial stages of doing this healing, and I mean very dangerous. I'm not anymore, because I'm in control of myself. But for quite a while, I was not in control of myself, especially when I would drink. And that's why I don't drink anymore. When you drink, you are probably the most accessible when you are in an altered state. Like, if you're drinking, using anything like cocaine, methamphetamine, anything like that, those things are opposites, kind of, because like methamphetamine and cocaine are going to put you like into a false light situation, where drinking is going to put you down into your lower chakras, right? But in combination, those two things are horrible. It's like the worst thing you can do. And you'll often find a lot of people with this type of programming that have done exactly that, like myself, in the past, right? So any drug that puts you in an altered state you got to stop it. You got to stop it like completely. And that might be forever. Frankly, people that are highly spiritually aware, that are healed, they don't tend to have any desire to want to use drugs or drink at all. As I've healed, I've basically lost all desire to really do any of that shit. But it took me time. But all of this is doable, and I do think that in a lot of cases it really is necessary to get good help in doing a lot of these things, but you need to be very careful about who you choose to work with. Be extremely discerning about anyone you allow to do any type of healing work with you, shamanic work, even allowing someone to do a high degree of prayer for you. You need to vet them. You need to get to know them. You need to really, really make sure that you can trust them, before you allow them to do any of this work with you, because there are a lot of people out there that, are dirty, man. It's just the way it is. It's not necessarily their fault either, but we got to call a spade here and look at things the way that they are. So, yeah. I guess I'll call it good for today. I really hope that this video was helpful for people. And I will make more videos on this stuff as time goes on. I sort of speak when Spirit says to speak. And this is what's been coming up the last couple of months, so I'm sure there's a reason for it. Maybe I don't know exactly what that is yet. Maybe I do. But that's all for today. Have a good evening. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button down below and click the icon to your left to subscribe. New content every week about spirituality and addiction from myself, Joe Fortin. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.